I had owned my small piece of land in the Northwoods for about 3 years. It was 40 acres of mixed pine, cedar swamps, and old logging trails, tucked inside the Ashwood National Forest in Minnesota. I bought it for the same reasons most men buy quiet land far from everything else. But the real reason was simpler and uglier. I bought it because I needed a place where the world could not follow me. Most weekends, that meant turkey hunting. Early mornings, long waits, repeated calls, and the kind of patience most people do not have. But turkey hunting belongs to the morning. By late afternoon, the forest settles into a silence that can make a man restless. In October of last year, the predator numbers on my property had started getting out of control. There were too many coyotes. Fox sign was everywhere. Tracks crossed the old logging roads as if they owned them. So one evening, with daylight still left and nothing better to do, I decided to cut their numbers down. Predator hunting on my land was never anything complicated or elaborate. I was not trying to draw them in from miles away, and I was not playing around with electronic calls. I knew their routes. I knew where they crossed at dusk, the low saddles and narrow gaps where they moved through without thinking. I climbed into one of my stands overlooking a worn clearing beside an old logging spur, settled in with the wind coming into my face, and waited. I had my Ruger American chambered in .223 Remington, a perfect setup for a fox or coyote inside 200 yards. That was exactly why I had bought it. Cheap, plain, and effective. I was not expecting any trouble. I was only passing time and managing my stretch of woods the way I always had. The daylight was already starting to fade. Then, without warning, I heard a scream. It was high, panicked, and sharp enough to slice through the quiet woods. It came from a few hundred yards away, close enough that I could tell it was a woman, and frantic enough that I could not ignore it. There was no way to mistake it for a shout or an ordinary call. It was the kind of scream that carried real terror inside it, raw and broken, like the person making it could not get a full breath. I knew at once that whoever had made that sound was in serious trouble. I did not hesitate. I shouldered the rifle, fixed the direction in my mind, and started toward it at a fast walk that quickly turned into a run. I ran straight through the brush, ignoring the branches whipping my face every few seconds. The sound had come from one of the public trails that ran along the eastern edge of my property. It was not a popular trail, and at that hour, no one should have been out there. The area was a good distance from the nearest trailhead. Just as I reached the trail, another scream rang out. This one was just as desperate as the first. I was close now. I turned north and ran toward a small clearing with a few benches where people sometimes stopped to rest. A woman, maybe in her late 30s, was standing behind a dog. It looked like a golden retriever. The dog was barking wildly at something just beyond the edge of the clearing. Its body was stiff, its hackles raised, every instinct locked onto one point. As I got closer, I saw what the dog was barking at. A tall figure stood partly hidden in the shadows, just inside the tree line. Even at first glance, I knew it was not any animal I recognized. By my estimate, it was somewhere between 6.5 and 7 feet tall, and the whole time I watched it, it stayed upright on 2 legs. It did not sway back and forth or drop onto all fours the way a bear might. Its shoulders were hunched forward, and its upper body leaned slightly toward the woman and the dog. Both arms were held out in front of it, bent at the elbows, as if it were ready to reach or grab. Thick fur covered the head, neck, and shoulders almost like a mane. But the arms and most of the torso were mostly bare. Where there was no fur, I could see the skin. It was dark, somewhere between gray and brown, with a smooth but dense look, like muscle stretched tight beneath it. From the collarbones down across the chest and stomach, the upper body looked almost human in its shape. It had defined shoulders, a broad chest, and visible muscle lines, only covered here and there with patches of fur instead of hair. The thing was tall, much taller than the woman. Its arms were longer than a person's arms should have been, even for something that height. Its hands were large and hung down past mid-thigh. From where I stood, they looked more like clawed human hands than paws. As I came up behind the woman, I could make out more details. There were 5 digits on each hand, and each one ended in dark, curved claws instead of anything like a paw pad. The head was clearly shaped like a wolf's, or maybe a large dog's, with a long muzzle and visible ears set on top. But on a body like that, it made no sense. I could see the creature clearly enough, but I still could not identify it. Not even close. It did not match any animal I had ever seen in the woods before. It did not match any deformity my imagination could invent either. The woman was crying and trying to hold the dog back as it fought to lunge toward the creature. The dog was extremely agitated, barking over and over, with the occasional low growl buried underneath. The leash stayed stretched tight between them the entire time. Then the creature took several slow steps toward the woman and the dog, closing the distance by a few feet. At first, its attention seemed fixed on the dog. Then its head shifted slightly toward the woman. From the way it moved and the way its body was angled, I knew it was about to attack. The woman screamed again and tried to step backward. But the dog kept pulling forward toward the creature, and she would not let go of the leash. It was obvious she was not strong enough to drag the dog back. At the same time, she seemed unwilling to release it. So instead of getting farther away, she was pulled a step or two closer to the creature. That was when the creature began to growl loudly as it kept moving in on them. The sound was deep, and it carried all the way across the clearing. As it came nearer, the dog's behavior changed. Instead of straining forward, the golden retriever suddenly retreated and slipped behind the woman's legs. It pressed itself hard against the backs of her knees and thighs, whining now and letting out short, frightened barks. With the dog no longer pulling her toward the thing, the woman managed to move back a few feet. But the creature kept coming at the same steady pace. Its head and eyes seemed fixed on her now. From where I stood, she looked completely terrified. She kept looking back and forth between the animal and the ground in front of her as she tried to move, and I could hear her crying even from more than 50 feet away. I did not know if the creature had noticed me coming up behind them, but up to that moment, it had not looked my way or reacted to me at all. Then the woman's heel caught the dog's front leg or shoulder, and she tripped over the animal, falling backward onto the ground. The creature did not slow. It kept advancing toward her, and judging by the distance left between them, I knew that if I did not act immediately, it would be on her within seconds. At that point, I pulled the rifle from my shoulder and brought it up. I understood right away that the Ruger was not the right weapon for something that size. But it was the only weapon I had with me. I also knew I might not have to kill it outright. If I could hurt it badly enough, or scare it hard enough, that might be enough to make it break off the attack and leave. For reasons I still cannot fully explain, my first shot was not aimed straight at the creature. I fired a warning shot past its head, high and off to one side. The report cracked across the clearing, and the round disappeared into the trees beyond it. The creature stopped for a brief moment and turned its head toward me, as if it were weighing the situation again. Then it turned back toward the woman and started forward once more. So I did what I should have done from the beginning. I fired directly at it. By then, I was nervous as hell, and keeping the rifle steady was difficult. I had never shot at anything bigger than a coyote before, and the whole thing had me badly shaken. Instead of trying for a headshot, I aimed for the chest. I fired 2 rounds in quick succession. Both hit. One struck high, near what I would describe as the collarbone on the left side of its chest. The other hit the upper part of its left arm or shoulder, roughly halfway between the shoulder and the elbow. The creature reacted the instant the round struck. Its upper body jolted back slightly from the impact near the collarbone, and I saw a visible spray of dark material that I took to be blood and fur. When the second round hit the upper arm or shoulder area, that arm went slack for a moment, as if the muscle had been seriously damaged. The creature let out a loud, brutal sound, something between a roar and a deep, rough shout. It took 2 or 3 uneven steps to the side, almost as if it were trying to regain its balance. Then it squared itself again, turning its upper body toward me. Now its attention seemed locked entirely on me. For a second or two, it appeared to hesitate, as if deciding what to do next. The woman on the ground had managed to crawl backward a few yards and was starting to get up again. I worked the bolt and fired again. Then again. I emptied the rifle. This time, I tried to aim higher, toward the head and neck, but my aim was far from steady by then. I was breathing hard, and I could feel the scope trembling against my eyebrow. I cannot say exactly how many of those shots landed, but I am confident that at least one more round hit somewhere along the side of its head or upper neck, because I saw another small burst of fur and a clear reaction in that area. Still, the animal did not fall. So it was obvious I had not landed a solid headshot. Instead, while I was still firing, It dropped onto all fours in one quick movement and turned away from us. That thing moved with unbelievable speed. It was leaping 10 or 15 feet at a time, and I could see the raw power in its hind legs. The beast charged back into the underbrush at the edge of the clearing and vanished into the trees within seconds. All it left behind was movement in the brush and the sound of branches snapping as it went. As soon as I was certain it was out of sight, I went straight to the woman and the dog to check on them. She was standing again, but she was shaking badly. Her breathing was fast and uneven. The dog stayed close to her, pressed against her leg, still visibly nervous, but no longer barking or trying to pull against the leash. I asked her if she was hurt. She said she did not think so, but she was clearly traumatized. She kept looking toward the direction the creature had gone, then back at me. The first thing she kept asking was, "What the hell was that?" She repeated the question several times in slightly different ways, and I had no good answer. At one point, she used the word werewolf and asked if that was what I thought it had been. I told her I did not know exactly what to call it, but I said the word werewolf fit the description about as well as anything I had ever heard. Aside from the fact that people who follow these kinds of reports often use the term dogman instead. Once she had calmed down enough to speak clearly, I asked what she was doing out there so late in the day, and how far she was from her vehicle. She told me she had been hiking with her dog, had taken a wrong turn somewhere on the trail, and had ended up farther from the main path than she meant to go. She guessed her car was still at least 2 miles away, maybe more, back toward the trailhead. By then, it was already getting dark. I told her that, in my opinion, it was too dangerous for her to try walking back to her car in the dark with that thing still somewhere nearby. I explained that I owned land and had a small cabin not far from where we were. The safest choice, I told her, was for her and the dog to come back with me, stay there for the night, and then we could get her back to her vehicle in daylight once we knew the area was clear. She agreed without much hesitation. On the way back to my place, she told me her first name was Claire, and that the dog's name was Daisy. My cabin was only about half a mile from where the encounter had happened. Even so, the walk felt long, because I kept watching our surroundings. I had reloaded the rifle and kept it half-raised, glancing over my shoulder every few seconds. I did not see or hear the dogman again on the way back. There were no more growls. No movement I could clearly connect to it. The dog slowly calmed enough to keep walking without dragging or refusing to move, though she stayed close to Claire the entire time. When we reached the cabin, I unlocked the door and brought them inside. I showed Claire the bathroom so she could wash her face and pull herself together a little. Then I put a kettle on the stove to make tea. I figured something hot to drink might help her settle down. Daisy stayed near the front door at first, sniffing around before finally lying down on the rug, but her eyes stayed on the door more than anything else. After Claire had cleaned herself up, we sat at the small table in the main room with 2 mugs of tea. I asked her to tell me, in her own words, how the encounter with the dogman had started. She said that for a while before it actually revealed itself, she had felt like something was following them or shadowing them. Several times along the trail, Daisy had stopped, turned toward the trees, and started barking at something Claire could not see. During those moments, Claire said she noticed no movement and nothing that looked out of place. But the dog's behavior made her think something was there, keeping pace with them just beyond sight. She said that when she reached the clearing, she walked a little farther in. Then, as she described it, the thing simply stood up from behind the brush. That was the first time she saw it clearly. Daisy went insane at that point, barking, lunging, and pulling hard against the leash. Claire said her impression was that it did not like the dog at all, and that it might have been territorial. She told me she had never been that frightened in her life. Every instinct in her body told her the dogman was going to tear them apart. She said that if I had not arrived when I did, she was certain it would have killed both her and Daisy. She thanked me several times for saving her life and Daisy's. From her expression and her voice, it was obvious she meant every word. Even after we had been back at the cabin for a while and had talked through what happened, I still had a very bad feeling about the whole thing. The encounter had happened too close to my place for me to feel comfortable. It was well inside the general area I thought of as my backyard. By then, it was completely dark outside, but I decided I needed to do more to prepare, in case the dogman chose to come looking for us later that night. The man I bought the cabin and land from had been some kind of prepper. When I moved in, He had left a few old bear traps in the shed behind the cabin. I had never used them. I had never seriously considered using them either, because under normal circumstances, there was no reason for that kind of equipment on my property. But in this situation, my personal feelings about those traps no longer mattered. Given what I had just seen, I decided I would use whatever tools I had. I went outside with a flashlight, retrieved the traps, and started setting them around the cabin, mostly beneath the windows and in front of the back door, at the points where I thought something might try to force its way in. I took care to set each trap properly, then covered them with a layer of fallen leaves so they would not stand out to anything moving around the cabin. While I was doing that, I also thought about the danger to the dog. I did not want Daisy accidentally stepping into one of those traps. When I finished, I went back inside and explained to Claire exactly what I had done and where every trap was. I told her very clearly to keep Daisy close and not let her wander outside the cabin by herself. I also told her that if Daisy needed to go out during the night to relieve herself, she should take her well away from the cabin, off to the side, away from the walls and windows. After that, I brought out my other guns and made sure they were loaded and ready. Besides the Ruger, I had a 12-gauge shotgun and a Glock 19 9mm. For the shotgun, I only had turkey loads on hand, which would be almost useless against something that size. But I loaded it anyway, in case I needed it at extremely close range. The pistol was my best option inside the cabin. At a distance, it would not be worth much. But up close, it was light, quick, and deadly. Once I had done everything I could to prepare, there was nothing left to do except wait and try to rest. I told Claire she could sleep on the couch in the main room. Then I went into the small bedroom off to the side, where I usually slept. I kept the pistol within reach and left the bedroom door open, so I could hear anything happening in the main room or outside. Claire lay down on the couch with Daisy curled up on the floor beside her. The cabin was quiet, but it did not feel peaceful. Somehow, I knew something was going to happen that night. Call it instinct. Maybe even some kind of genetic memory. I did manage to sleep for a while. But just after midnight, I woke to a sound I could not immediately place. It was not loud. It sounded more like a faint scuff or a subtle shift somewhere in the structure, just enough to open my eyes. I stayed still for a few seconds and listened. When I did not hear anything else right away, I reached for the 9mm on the nightstand, took hold of it, and got up. I moved quietly to the doorway and looked into the main room. Claire was still asleep on the couch, but Daisy was awake and alert. The dog was sitting upright, facing the front door. Her body was tense, but she was not making a sound. No barking, no whining, nothing. In my experience with dogs, that kind of silent focus usually means they know there is something nearby they consider a serious threat. I took it as a sign that the dogman was outside somewhere, most likely close to the front door or directly in front of it. I went over to the couch, placed my hand on Claire's shoulder, and shook her gently awake. As soon as her eyes opened, I pressed a finger to my lips, telling her to stay quiet. Then I pointed toward the bedroom and mouthed for her to take Daisy in there and lock the door. That room had no windows. It was the safest place in the cabin. Claire did not argue. She got up, took Daisy by the collar, and quietly guided her into the bedroom. I stayed in the main room and waited for the dogman to make its move. After a short stretch of silence, I heard movement on the other side of the front door. The first thing that happened was the doorknob turning slowly, as if someone outside were testing it. That stunned me. Whatever that thing was, it clearly understood how doors worked. When it realized the door was locked and would not open, it changed tactics. A few seconds later, it began throwing its weight against the door. Every impact made the wood bend and the frame crack. The front door was solid and heavy because I had wanted the cabin to be bear-proof. Even so, the hits were powerful enough that I was not sure it would hold forever. For a moment, I considered firing through the door. But I doubted the pistol rounds would punch through that thick wood with enough force left to do any real damage. At that point, I decided the best option was to distract the animal and, if possible, draw it into one of the bear traps I had set beneath the windows. The living room window was on the wall opposite the front door. I knew I had placed a trap directly under it earlier that night. I moved to the window, unlatched it, and opened it. Then I reached outside and began striking the pistol against the exterior wall of the cabin. The moment I did that, the attack on the front door stopped. I kept banging the pistol against the wall for another second or two, making sure I had its full attention. Then I pulled my hand back inside, stepped away from the window, and raised the gun. For a moment, I heard no clear footsteps. No breathing. Only silence. Then the trap beneath the window snapped shut. A hard metallic crack rang out, followed almost instantly by a deafening scream of pain. A dark shape flashed across the lower part of the window as the animal twisted and fought to tear itself free. From where I stood, I could not see any details beyond a black shadow, but it was obvious the thing was struggling right below the window frame. I raised the 9mm and aimed toward the lower part of the window, only about 2 inches above the sill. When the dark silhouette rose again, I fired twice in rapid succession. It was dark inside the cabin and dark outside as well, so I could not really see what I was aiming at. I did not want to move any closer, so I was basically firing blind. Each shot lit the room for a split second with muzzle flash. Over the deafening echo of the gunfire, I heard the animal give another loud, painful scream. That told me I had probably hit it, but I had no way of knowing how badly it was hurt, or whether I had done any real damage at all. Outside, below the window, there was a lot of noise and movement against the wall. It was fighting hard to get itself out of the trap. I heard the metal squeal. Then came fast, heavy thuds that seemed to move away from the cabin. It had not only survived the shots. Somehow, it had also managed to free itself. After that, everything went quiet again. I moved back to the window, reached out only far enough to pull it shut, and locked it. Then I stepped back toward the center of the room with the pistol still in my hand, pointed down but ready. From the bedroom, I could hear Claire crying. Daisy was barking and whining, probably terrified by all the noise, especially the gunshots. I called out to Claire that it was gone, and that she should stay in the room for now. I told her I would let her know when I was sure it was safe. I stayed awake for the rest of the night, listening for any sign that the dogman had returned. But it did not come back. For a while, I thought about going after it. Then I decided that stepping outside in the dark would be a bad idea. I did not have a night vision scope or anything like that. Not that it would have changed much, since my rifle was too small for something like that anyway. For the moment, all I could do was wait for daylight and decide what to do from there. When morning finally came, I stepped outside and made a slow circuit around the cabin, carefully scanning the woods around it. I did not see or hear anything unusual. There was a clear trail starting directly beneath the living room window, where the trap had been forced open. The ground was torn up. The leaves had been scattered. There was a noticeable amount of blood on the leaves and on the side of the cabin where it had struggled. From there, the trail led into the woods in a fairly straight line. Even though I wanted to follow it right away, I decided my first priority was getting Claire and her dog safely back to her vehicle. I told her my truck was parked at the end of an old logging road about 700 yards from the cabin. I said we should head there, because I did not want to walk 3 miles through the woods with that thing still out there. We gathered her things, put Daisy on the leash, and walked out together. I carried the rifle in my hands and kept the 9mm holstered, scanning the woods on both sides of the trail the entire way. We did not see or hear anything that suggested the dogman was still close. The walk to the truck was quiet. So was the dog, which reassured me to some extent. My truck was parked in a small turnaround at the end of the old logging road. From there, getting back to Claire's SUV meant taking a series of Forest Service roads, and then a county road. Basically, it was a wide loop around the block of timber where my land sits. The drive took close to an hour. During that time, we saw nothing unusual along the roads. No dead animals. No large tracks that stood out to me. When we reached the trailhead, her SUV was still there. I stood guard while she loaded Daisy and her gear inside. She thanked me again several times for what I had done and said she would never forget it. I told her to be careful about hiking alone in the forest from then on. I also suggested she report the encounter if she felt comfortable doing it, though I admitted I had no idea who would take it seriously. After they left, I turned the truck around and drove back toward my cabin the same way I had come. When I finally returned, I stood there for a few minutes, thinking about what to do next. The trail of blood and disturbed ground was easy to follow. I knew the animal was injured from the gunshots and the trap. That gave me some advantage. But it also meant it might be even more dangerous if I cornered it. In the end, I decided I could not just leave something like that roaming the woods near my place. The creature was clearly dangerous, not only to me, but to hikers and other hunters in the area. My gear was not ideal for the situation. but I hoped that if I managed to put a few more bullets into the dogman, even .223 rounds, it might do the job. I checked the Ruger again, made sure I had plenty of extra rounds, and made sure I had spare magazines for the 9mm. Then I set out to follow the trail into the woods, hoping I could find it and finish it before it recovered or got too far away. I did not have to walk far before I found it again. The trail led downhill through thicker timber, then turned toward a stream that runs through the neighboring property. I spotted the creature lying on its stomach on the bank of that stream. From where I first saw it, it looked like it was either resting or struggling to get up. It was facing partly toward the water, with its head low and one arm stretched toward the edge. It had not noticed me. I stayed as low as I could and moved into a position where I had a clear line of sight. By my estimate, I was about 200 feet away when I stopped and set up for the shot. This time, I took more time to steady myself. I settled into a stable shooting position, raised the rifle, and lined up on the creature's head. My plan was to put one clean, precise shot into it and end it right there. When I was as steady as I was going to get, I took a breath, let part of it out, and squeezed the trigger. The rifle fired. I saw the round strike somewhere on the side of its head. Blood sprayed, and the head snapped to the side. But it did not drop and stay down the way I expected a solid headshot to do. Instead, as soon as it recovered from the impact, it started moving. It crawled and clawed its way toward the water. I worked the bolt and kept firing as it moved away from me and out of sight. At least 2 of those shots seemed to hit somewhere in the back or side. It was hard to tell because despite its injuries, it could still move quickly and jerk around a lot. Still, the dogman did not die. Anything short of a perfect headshot with that caliber seemed to do nothing more than cause pain to something that size. I cursed myself for not calling for help when I had the chance. There are plenty of cabins out there, and many of those people own bigger guns than I do. But by then it was too late. The dogman reached the water and rolled off the bank directly into the stream. I ran down the slope toward the creek, hoping to reach the edge in time to get one more shot before the current carried it away. By the time I got to the bank, the dogman was already more than 200 feet downstream. The water was moving faster than I had realized. The creature rolled and turned in the current, sometimes partly above the surface, sometimes mostly underwater. I tried to get the rifle on it, but between the growing distance, the moving water, and the way it kept twisting, it was useless. Within seconds, it was out of range and moving too fast for me to catch up on foot. I stood there and watched it float and tumble away until it passed around a bend and disappeared from sight. I did not see it climb out on either bank, but the trees and brush limited my view, so I cannot say for sure what happened to it after that. I followed the bank for a while, looking for any sign that it had come ashore. I did not find any tracks leading away from the water. This whole thing happened a little over a year ago. Since then, I have not seen the dogman again on my land. I have not found any new tracks. No sign at all that I could connect to that damn creature. I asked around to see if anyone had seen or heard anything strange, but no one had. Because of that, I am fairly confident it either died from its wounds or, at the very least, left the area for good. Even so, knowing that something like that exists at all has changed the way I feel about the woods. Before this happened, I enjoyed being out there alone. I hunted, hiked, and worked around the property without worrying about anything beyond the ordinary risks you expect outdoors. Since the encounter with the dogman, that feeling is gone. I still go out there to check on things, but I do not relax the way I used to. I am always thinking about the possibility that there could be another one of those things somewhere nearby. After a lot of thought, I have started the process of selling the cabin and the land. The experience with the dogman killed any desire I had to be out in nature. It has more or less ruined hunting and hiking for me. I think I am done with the woods for good. I am not telling anyone to stay out of the woods completely. People are going to keep hunting, hiking, and camping no matter what I say. But if there is one thing I would tell anyone who spends time in remote forests, or even well-traveled ones, it is this. Do not assume you know everything that prowls out there. Do not go in unprepared. Know where you are going. Let someone know where you will be. Carry the right gear. Arm yourself before you head out. Most days, you will only ever face the normal dangers of the outdoors. But after what I have seen, I can say one thing for certain. There are things out there you are not ready for. No matter how tough you think you are,